At 9:14 p.m., while my wife showered upstairs, her phone lit up beside me on the couch. "How's our little guy tonight?" The message came from her boss. I was holding my 3-month-old son when I read it. For a second, I honestly thought maybe I'd misunderstood something. Maybe Grant Holloway texted everybody too casually. Maybe Emily had talked about Noah so much at work, the guy felt weirdly familiar with him. But then I read it again. Our little guy. Not the baby. Not Noah. Our. Upstairs water rushed through the pipes. Emily always showered late after work now, said it helped her wash the office off. That night I could hear her humming faintly over the sound of the water while I sat frozen on our brown leather couch with a baby bottle in one hand and her phone glowing in the other. Noah shifted against my chest and made that little sleepy grunt babies make. His tiny fingers curled around my thumb. I stared at the screen so long it dimmed, then lit up again when another message came through. Did he finally sleep longer today? My stomach dropped hard enough I actually felt dizzy. The TV kept playing quietly in the background. Some rerun of Blue Bloods. Frank Reagan giving one of those speeches about loyalty and family. Funny timing, I guess. I set Noah carefully into the crook of my arm and unlocked Emily's phone. Nothing. No message thread. Just an empty screen. Deleted. That somehow hurt worse than the text itself. Because innocent people don't erase conversations. I sat there listening to the dryer rumbling in the laundry room and the shower upstairs and the old refrigerator motor clicking on in the kitchen. Normal sounds. Our normal house. 18 years of marriage wrapped inside those sounds. And suddenly none of it felt real anymore. I'm Daniel Mercer, 52 years old. I own a small HVAC company in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Nothing glamorous. 3 vans. 6 employees if nobody calls in sick. I spent most of my life crawling through hot attics and fixing furnaces people ignored until Christmas Eve. My back hurts most mornings now. My right knee clicks on stairs. And for almost 20 years, I thought my wife loved me the same steady way I loved her. Emily was 41, smart, funny, pretty without trying too hard. The kind of woman who still looked good wearing one of my old Notre Dame sweatshirts and reading receipts at the kitchen counter. We'd spent years trying for a baby. Years. Doctor appointments in Indianapolis. Hormone treatments. Failed IVF cycles that emptied our savings faster than I wanted to admit. Nights where Emily cried quietly into my chest because another pregnancy test came back negative. I gave her injections myself sometimes because her hands shook too badly to do it. When Noah was born 3 months earlier, I honestly thought the hardest part of our marriage was finally behind us. Turns out I was wrong. Very wrong. I looked at the phone again. Grant Holloway. Regional sales director. Expensive suits. 2 white teeth. Lived in Carmel outside Indianapolis. Drove a black Audi SUV that probably cost more than my first house. I'd met him twice. Once at Emily's company Christmas dinner. Second time at Noah's hospital visit after the birth. He'd brought flowers and joked that Noah already looked stubborn like his mom. At the time, I'd thought he was just one of those overly polished corporate guys. Now every memory felt contaminated. Upstairs, the shower turned off. Panic hit me fast and sharp. I quickly took screenshots of both messages and sent them to myself. Then I put her phone exactly where it had been. My hands were trembling so badly I nearly dropped the bottle. Noah started fussing again, hungry now. I stood up automatically and carried him into the kitchen. Formula powder, warm water, shake bottle, tested on wrist. Muscle memory. Funny thing about heartbreak. Your body keeps doing ordinary things while your brain feels like it's sliding off a cliff. I fed Noah slowly in the dim kitchen light while trying not to think too hard. Maybe there was some explanation. Maybe Grant called every employee's kid our little guy. Maybe I was becoming one of those paranoid husbands people laugh about online. But deep down, I already knew. You don't delete innocent conversations. That's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal at our age. It's rarely one giant dramatic moment. Usually it's 100 tiny things suddenly lining up into something ugly. Late nights at work. Phone face down at dinner. Extra gym visits. New perfume. A woman saying you're imagining things enough times that eventually you stop trusting your own instincts. I opened Facebook. Typed in Linda Holloway. Her profile picture showed a woman around my age holding a golden retriever beside a lake somewhere in Michigan. She looked normal, kind even. PTA bored kind of face. Somebody who probably reminded people about casserole dishes after church potlucks. I clicked message. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for almost a full minute. I could still stop this. Still pretend I hadn't seen anything. Still protect whatever was left of my marriage. Then Noah looked up at me with Emily's eyes. And something inside me hardened. I sent the screenshots. Underneath them, I typed 6 words. You deserve to know the truth. Then I deleted the conversation from Emily's phone history, locked the screen, and sat there holding my son while my wife blow-dried her hair upstairs. 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Emily called from upstairs, Danny. Can you get that? I walked to the front door slowly. Every step felt strange, like I was walking through someone else's life. When I opened the door, a woman stood on the porch wearing jeans, white sneakers, and a navy sweatshirt. Her mascara had smeared beneath both eyes. In one hand, she held an iPad. The other hand shook slightly from the cold. For a second, we just stared at each other. Then she spoke quietly. I'm Linda Holloway, she said, and I think we've both been lied to. Behind me upstairs, I heard Emily start humming again. For a second, neither of us moved. Cold October air drifted through the open doorway behind Linda. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and stopped. Ordinary suburban sounds, the kind you stop noticing after 20 years in the same neighborhood. Then Noah started crying in my arms. Not screaming, just that tired, confused baby cry that usually meant he was hungry again or wanted to be held differently. Linda looked down at him immediately. And weirdly enough, that's what made the whole thing feel real. Not the screenshots. Not the deleted texts. The baby crying between us while my wife stood upstairs blow-drying her hair. Come in, I said quietly. Linda stepped inside. She looked smaller than I expected. Tired, maybe early 50s. She smelled faintly like cold air and peppermint gum. I shut the door behind her. Upstairs, I could hear dresser drawers opening and closing. Emily moving around our bedroom, completely unaware her life was already splitting apart downstairs. Noah's crying got louder. Sorry, I muttered automatically. Linda shook her head. Don't apologize. I carried Noah into the kitchen while Linda followed carefully, like she wasn't sure how much space she was allowed to occupy inside another woman's home. The kitchen lights were too bright suddenly. I laid Noah gently into the little rocker beside the table and reached for another bottle from the fridge. You want me to warm it? Linda asked softly. That caught me off guard. I looked at her for a second, then handed her the bottle without speaking. Funny how fast normal human instinct kicks in, even in terrible situations. She warmed the bottle while I bounced Noah gently against my shoulder. His tiny cries softened into little hiccups. Neither of us talked for almost a full minute. Then Linda finally said I almost didn't come. I kept rocking Noah. But you did. Yeah, she stared at the microwave, turning slowly. Because when another woman sends you proof your husband might be sleeping with her, you don't really sleep after that. The microwave beeped. She handed me the bottle. Our fingers brushed for half a second, both cold. I sat down at the kitchen table and fed Noah, while Linda placed the iPad carefully beside my placemat. I found more, she said. My chest tightened immediately. How much more? She gave a tired little laugh that wasn't really a laugh. You got about 4% of it. I leaned back slowly in my chair. The kitchen suddenly felt too small. Linda unlocked the iPad and opened synced messages. Not hundreds, thousands. Months of conversations. Photos. Hotel confirmations. Inside jokes. I felt my throat tighten so badly I had trouble swallowing. Grant, tell our little linebacker I'm buying him Colts tickets someday. Emily only if Daniel doesn't bore him to death first. Another one. Grant, did he finally stop crying at 2 a.m.? Emily, he slept longer when you held him. That one hit me harder than I expected. Not because it proved physical cheating, because it proved intimacy, routine, familiarity. This wasn't reckless motel room nonsense. This was woven into daily life. I stared at the screen while Noah drank his bottle peacefully in my arms. My son. Mine. At least, I hoped. Linda kept talking quietly. There were hotel receipts too. She opened another folder. Indianapolis Marriott. Chicago Riverfront Hotel. Conference weekends. Fake work trips. I noticed dates immediately. One was during the week Emily told me she had mandatory training. Another happened 2 weeks after Noah was born. 2 weeks. I actually closed my eyes for a second after seeing that. That was around the time Emily could barely walk comfortably after delivery. I was changing diapers at 3 a.m. while she healed upstairs. And somehow this man was already back in our lives. Linda watched my face carefully. "You okay?" "No," I said honestly. Then after a pause, "But I'm not gonna punch a wall if that's what you're asking." That got the tiniest smile out of her. First one all night. She rubbed her forehead and looked exhausted suddenly. "I found out about the affair 3 months ago," she admitted. I looked up sharply. "You knew?" "I suspected before that, but 3 months ago I knew." "Then why stay?" That question came out harsher than I intended. Linda didn't seem offended. Instead, she looked around my kitchen quietly. The family photos, Noah's stroller near the garage door, Emily's breast pump drying beside the sink. Then she said something that shut me up immediately. Because after 30 years with somebody, leaving isn't just leaving. That landed hard. She continued softly. You leave routines, inside jokes, shared bills, holidays, grandkids you thought you'd eventually have, the version of yourself that existed with that person. I looked down at Noah sleeping against my arm now, and suddenly I understood exactly what she meant. Linda scrolled farther through messages. Some flirtation, some arguments, some conversations weirdly normal. One message from Emily made my stomach turn cold. Daniel still thinks Noah looks exactly like him. I gripped the edge of the kitchen table so hard my knuckles hurt. Linda noticed. I'm sorry. I shook my head slowly. No, don't apologize for telling me the truth. Upstairs footsteps crossed the bedroom floor. Emily. My heartbeat jumped immediately. But instead of coming downstairs, I heard the mattress creak faintly overhead. She'd gone to bed, completely unaware. Linda lowered her voice. There's something else. I almost laughed from exhaustion. Of course there is. She hesitated. Grant transferred about $8,200 out of our investment account 2 months ago. For her. I think so. I stared at the iPad again. Suddenly, every late meeting and every conference dinner started rearranging themselves inside my head into something uglier. I remembered Emily coming home smiling at her phone. I remembered her guarding it in bed. I remembered asking once if everything was okay between us and her laughing softly before saying, You worry too much. Noah shifted in his sleep against my chest. Tiny warm breaths. Tiny fingers curled against my shirt. And for the first time that night, real fear hit me. Not fear about Emily. Fear about him. Because once that thought enters your mind, once somebody says our little guy, you can't put it back. Linda must have seen it on my face. You're wondering if the baby's yours. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. She leaned back in her chair slowly. For what it's worth, I think Grant believes he's the father. That sentence physically hurt, like getting hit in the ribs. I stood up suddenly and walked to the sink pretending I needed water. Truth was, I just needed a second where nobody could see my face. I stared out the kitchen window into the dark backyard while my reflection looked back at me. 52 years old, standing barefoot in sweatpants at midnight, wondering if my son was actually mine. Behind me, Linda spoke carefully. So what now? I stayed quiet a long time. Then finally said, There's a baby sleeping 10 feet away. I turned around slowly, and until I know the truth, I'm not blowing up my whole family. Linda nodded once, like she understood exactly. Around 1 a.m., she finally stood to leave. At the door, she paused. If you need anything, she started, then stopped. Because honestly, what do you even say after a night like that? After she left, I locked the front door and stood there listening to the silence. Then I walked upstairs. Emily was asleep already, one arm curled around my pillow. She looked peaceful, safe, like the woman I'd spent nearly half my life loving. I stood there for a long time holding Noah in the dark. The next morning, while Emily made coffee and kissed my cheek like nothing had changed, I secretly ordered a DNA test kit from my phone. People think the worst part of betrayal is the moment you find out. It's not. The worst part is waking up the next morning and realizing life keeps moving anyway. The dog still needs fed. Bills still show up. The baby still cries at 2 a.m. And somehow you're expected to keep acting like a normal human being while your brain feels like somebody shoved broken glass into it. The DNA test kit arrived 3 days later in a plain brown box sitting on our porch beside a case of formula from Costco. Emily brought it inside without even noticing the shipping label. "More HVAC parts?" she asked casually. "Something like that," I said. That sentence bothered me afterward. Because I'd never lied easily before. Not to her. Not really. The next 10 days became the longest stretch of my life. I started noticing everything. Not in a dramatic movie way either. More like, my brain wouldn't shut off anymore. Emily smiling at her phone while folding laundry. Emily taking calls outside. Emily suddenly locking the bathroom door when she showered. Tiny things. But once trust cracks, your mind starts building stories out of every little movement. Meanwhile, Noah kept being Noah. He spit up on my work shirts, fell asleep on my chest during Colts games, made those tiny dinosaur noises babies make at 4 in the morning. Every time I looked at him, I felt two completely opposite things at once. Love and fear. One afternoon, I nearly backed my service van into a mailbox because I caught myself staring at a father pushing a stroller outside a Dairy Queen. The guy looked maybe 35, ball cap, work boots, exhausted, happy. I sat at the stop sign way too long until somebody behind me honked. That became my life for those 10 days, forgetting things, losing focus. I missed a customer appointment for the first time in almost 7 years. Mrs. Delaney over on Maple Creek Road called asking if I was okay, because you never forget appointments, Daniel. I blamed lack of sleep from the baby, which wasn't exactly a lie. At night, Emily still curled against me in bed sometimes. That part nearly broke me. Because muscle memory in a marriage is powerful. 18 years builds habits your body remembers even when your heart doesn't know what to do anymore. One night around 1:30 a.m., Noah started crying. Emily groaned softly beside me. "I've got him," I whispered. Downstairs, I warmed a bottle while Noah fussed against my shoulder. The kitchen smelled faintly like formula and coffee grounds and the leftover chicken casserole Emily's mother had dropped off earlier that day. I sat in the recliner feeding him slowly in the dark. And suddenly I started crying. Not loud, not dramatic. Just exhausted tears running down my face while this tiny little human looked up at me, completely trusting. I remember thinking, if this kid isn't mine, I honestly don't know if I survived that. That thought scared me more than anything, because I loved him already, completely. The next morning, Emily found me asleep in the recliner, still holding Noah. She smiled softly. "You're a good dad, Danny." I almost fell apart right there. Instead, I just nodded and asked her to hand me my coffee. That became the hardest part of those 10 days. Not anger, not revenge. Pretending. Pretending I didn't know. Pretending I wasn't studying her face every time she walked into a room. Pretending our entire marriage didn't suddenly feel unstable beneath my feet. One Thursday afternoon, I came home early after a canceled service call. Emily was out back on the patio talking quietly on her phone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I swear I wasn't. But then I heard Grant's name, and I stopped moving immediately. Emily's voice sounded tense. "No, you listen to me," she whispered sharply. "If Daniel finds out everything, we're both screwed." Silence. Then, "I know what you promised." Another pause. "I can't talk right now." She turned suddenly and saw me standing inside near the sliding door. For half a second, panic flashed across her face, then disappeared. "Hey," she said quickly, "you're home early." "Canceled appointment." She nodded too fast. That was my sister. I looked directly at her. And for the first time in our marriage, I knew with absolute certainty my wife was lying to my face. That realization hurt in a surprisingly quiet way. No explosion. No shouting. Just something inside me slowly sinking lower. 3 days later, the DNA results arrived. I couldn't open them at home. Couldn't sit across from Emily at the kitchen table pretending everything was normal while staring at an envelope that might destroy my life. So I drove. I ended up parked beside a Dairy Queen off Interstate 69 with the engine running and the heater blasting because Indiana cold gets into your bones this time of year. My hands shook opening the envelope. I remember every stupid detail. Country song playing low on the radio. French fry smell drifting through the parking lot. A teenager in a red visor carrying trash bags outside. Then I saw the results. Probability of paternity 99.99%. I just stared. Read it again. Then I started sobbing so hard I had to lean forward against the steering wheel. Noah was mine. Mine. The relief hit first. Pure, overwhelming relief. Then came anger. Real anger. Because Emily had cheated. She had lied. And somehow she'd still let me spend 10 days wondering whether my own son belonged to another man. I sat there crying like an idiot in my work van for probably 15 minutes. A teenage employee walking outside actually glanced over, looking concerned. I waved him off. Eventually, I called Linda. She answered immediately. Well, he's mine. She let out a long breath. Oh, thank God. I laughed bitterly at that. Yeah, thank God. But the truth was, it didn't fix anything. Not really. The betrayal still existed. Maybe worse now. Because now it wasn't about whether Noah was mine. It was about the fact Emily had risked destroying everything we built anyway. Linda grew quiet on the phone. Then she said, there's more happening. Of course there was. She explained company auditors had started quietly reviewing Grant's expense reports. Apparently he'd been submitting fake travel reimbursements for over a year. Hotels, private dinners, weekend conferences that never existed. He's getting nervous, Linda said. Sloppy. How sloppy? She actually laughed this time. Yesterday, he accidentally sent a flirty voice memo to his office fantasy football group chat. Despite everything I snorted. Seriously. Apparently, half the sales department heard him call Emily baby. For the first time in days, I felt something almost close to satisfaction. Not joy. Just confirmation that cracks were spreading. That night after Emily went upstairs, I sat alone in the garage beside stacked diaper boxes and old paint cans drinking gas station coffee from a styrofoam cup. The furnace kicked on overhead. The house creaked softly. And for the first time since this started, revenge actually crossed my mind in a serious way. Not screaming. Not violence. Exposure. Truth. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Linda. 1 week from Saturday, she texted. Grant's getting a leadership award at the hospital charity gala downtown. Then another message arrived. Auditors will be there too. I almost didn't go. Twice, actually. The first time was 4 days before the gala, when I was sitting in my office above the garage reviewing payroll numbers. One of my technicians had called in sick, another van needed brakes, and Noah had kept us awake most of the night. Normal life stuff. That was the strange part through all of this. Betrayal didn't stop real life from piling up. My phone buzzed. Linda, you still coming Saturday? I stared at the message a long time before replying. I don't know. And I truly didn't. Because once something becomes public, you can't pull it back. You can't undo humiliation. You can't tell people to forget what they saw. Part of me still wanted to protect Emily. Even after everything. Maybe that sounds weak. Maybe it was. But when you spend 18 years loving somebody, your instincts don't switch off overnight. That Saturday afternoon, I nearly backed out again. Emily stood upstairs getting ready for the gala, while I fed Noah mashed bananas in the kitchen. He wore a tiny blue sleeper with footballs on it and somehow managed to get banana all over my sleeve. I laughed despite myself. Then immediately felt guilty for laughing at all. Emily came downstairs around 6 wearing a dark green dress I hadn't seen before. Simple, elegant, her hair curled loosely around her shoulders. For one dangerous second, she looked like the woman I married at 23. You sure you don't want to come tonight? She asked while fastening earrings. Spouses are invited. I kept wiping Noah's hands with a baby cloth. Nah, somebody's got to stay with this little man. She smiled softly. You've been distant lately. There it was. I shrugged without looking up. Tired. That's not all it is. I finally looked at her then, and I wondered if she could see it, if somewhere deep down she already knew I knew. But her face just looked concerned. Maybe guilty too. Hard to tell anymore. Emily walked over and kissed the top of Noah's head. Then mine. Don't stay up too late, she said lightly. The front door closed behind her 3 minutes later. At 6:42 p.m., Linda texted me again. If your coming auditors confirmed attendance? I looked down at Noah chewing on a plastic giraffe toy. Then I looked toward the empty driveway. And something inside me finally settled. Not rage. Not revenge exactly. Clarity. By 7:30, Noah was at my sister Karen's house across town, and I was driving south toward Indianapolis through cold October rain. The farther I drove, the tighter my chest felt. I kept thinking, you can still turn around. Nobody's forcing this. But I didn't. Downtown Indianapolis glowed wet and yellow under the streetlights when I arrived. Valet attendants hustled between cars holding umbrellas, while guests in formal wear hurried toward the hotel entrance. The Marriott Ballroom sat on the second floor. Big charity event for Riley Children's Hospital. Doctors, executives, pharmaceutical reps. The kind of event where people drink expensive wine while bidding on vacation packages. I almost laughed seeing my reflection in the glass elevator doors. 52-year-old HVAC guy in a charcoal suit he only wore to weddings and funerals. Linda met me near registration. She looked calmer than the night she came to my house. Still tired, though. You could see it around her eyes. You came, she said. Yeah. You okay? Nope. That actually made her smile a little. The ballroom was already crowded. Soft jazz piano drifted through the room, while waiters carried trays of shrimp cocktails and champagne. Men with expensive watches shook hands beside silent auction tables. And there was Emily. Across the room beside Grant, laughing at something one of the sales managers said. The sight hit me harder than I expected. Not because she looked happy, because she looked normal, comfortable, like our marriage wasn't quietly collapsing. Linda noticed me staring. You don't have to do this tonight. I looked at Grant. Tall, confident, one hand casually resting near Emily's back while he talked. Then I remembered sitting alone in my van opening DNA results. I remembered Noah crying in the dark while I wondered whether my own child belonged to somebody else. Yeah, I said quietly, I do. Around 8:30, Grant spotted us. The change in his face happened instantly. That smooth corporate confidence cracked for just half a second, then returned. He excused himself from his group and walked toward us holding a whiskey glass. Daniel, he said carefully, didn't expect to see you here. No kidding. Emily turned pale beside him. Linda folded her arms. Grant glanced between us quickly. The man was smart enough to understand immediately. What exactly is this, he asked quietly. I answered before Linda could. Conversation. His jaw tightened slightly. Not here. I almost laughed. Because suddenly he cared about privacy. Emily stepped closer to me. Danny. I held up one hand gently. Not now. That hurt her. I saw it immediately. And despite everything, part of me hated causing that look on her face. Grant forced a smile toward nearby guests passing by. Then leaned closer. Can we talk somewhere private? Linda muttered, there's a surprise. Grant ignored her. A few minutes later, he pulled me into a side hallway near the elevators. The second we were alone, his entire tone changed. Look, he said quietly, whatever Emily told you. She didn't tell me anything. That stopped him. I watched calculations happening behind his eyes. Then came the sentence that permanently erased any chance I'd ever pity him. Name your number. I blinked slowly. What? You're upset. I understand that. He lowered his voice further. But ugly divorces help nobody. I stared at him in disbelief. Not because he offered money. Because he honestly thought that's what mattered most to me. My son is 3 months old, I said quietly. Grant rubbed his forehead impatiently. Daniel, let's not turn this emotional. That sentence nearly made me hit him. Nearly. Instead, I slipped my hand into my coat pocket and pressed record on my phone. Grant kept talking. There are ways everybody walks away cleaner here. Cleaner, I repeated. Yes. I nodded slowly like I was considering it. Meanwhile, my phone recorded every word. Then 2 people turned the corner into the hallway. A man and woman wearing conference badges. Grant stiffened immediately. Grant Holloway, the man asked politely. Grant's face changed color. We just need clarification on a few reimbursement reports before Monday. Nobody spoke for about 3 seconds. Then Grant forced another smile. Of course. The auditors glanced briefly at me. At Linda standing farther down the hallway. At Emily near the ballroom entrance watching nervously. And suddenly the entire night shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like ice beginning to crack beneath someone's feet. You know what surprised me most about watching a man's life fall apart? How quiet it was. No screaming, no punches, no dramatic movie scene where everybody gasps and drops champagne glasses. Just tension, silence, and the slow realization spreading across a room that something ugly had been hiding underneath polished surfaces for a very long time. Grant stood in that hallway trying hard to keep his expression under control, while the auditors asked questions about travel reimbursements. Simple questions. Dates, conference names, hotel charges. But I could see sweat beginning to form near his temples. One auditor, the woman flipped through a folder calmly. "We're just trying to reconcile a few inconsistencies before quarter close," she explained. Grant forced a smile. "Absolutely, happy to help." His voice sounded different now. Tighter. The confident executive tone was slipping. Emily stood near the ballroom entrance watching all of this happen, with her arms folded tightly across her stomach. Every few seconds her eyes drifted toward me, like she was trying to figure out how much I knew. The answer, of course, was enough. Linda walked over quietly and handed the auditors a sealed envelope. No announcement. No theatrical moment. Just a calm movement that somehow felt far more devastating. "What's this?" the male auditor asked. "Documentation you may need," Linda replied. Grant's head snapped toward her instantly. "Linda." One word. Sharp. Warning her. But she didn't even look at him. The auditor opened the envelope slightly and glanced inside. Hotel receipts. Printed emails. Transfer records. I watched the exact second panic fully hit Grant Holloway. Not fear of losing Emily. Not fear of hurting his marriage. Fear of consequences. That told me everything I needed to know about the man. A few nearby executives had started noticing something was wrong. Conversations in the ballroom softened. Heads turned subtly. Nobody understood the full story yet, but people always sense trouble. Emily finally walked toward us slowly. "Danny," she said quietly. I looked at her, really looked at her, and suddenly I saw exhaustion on her face I'd ignored for months. Dark circles beneath makeup, tightness around her eyes, the strain of carrying too many lies at once. For one dangerous moment, pity flickered through me. Then Grant spoke again, and destroyed it. "This is getting blown completely out of proportion," he snapped. One auditor raised an eyebrow. Grant gestured angrily toward Emily, without even looking at her. "She's replaceable. None of this was worth this level of insanity." The hallway went dead silent. Emily looked like she'd been slapped. And something inside me finally hardened completely. Not because he betrayed me. Because after all this, after risking marriages and families and my son's future, this man still viewed people as disposable objects. Emily stared at him in disbelief. "You told me you loved me." Grant gave a short, irritated laugh. "Emily, please." That was it. That was the moment I stopped hesitating. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out my phone, and pressed play. Grant's recorded voice filled the hallway softly. "Everybody walks away cleaner if you keep this private." Nobody moved. The auditors exchanged a quick glance. Grant's face drained white. I slipped the phone back into my pocket calmly. Then I looked directly at Emily. Not angry anymore. Just tired. "I stood beside you through every failed treatment," I said quietly. "Every appointment, every shot, every night you cried thinking your body failed you." Emily's eyes filled immediately. The ballroom noise behind us suddenly felt very far away. "You remember that?" I asked. She nodded once. Tears sliding now. And somehow I continued softly. I became the last person in the room who knew what was happening to my own marriage. Emily covered her mouth with one hand. Nobody interrupted. Not Linda. Not the auditors. Not even Grant. For the first time all night, he looked genuinely cornered. The male auditor finally cleared his throat. "Mr. Holloway," he said carefully, "we're going to need a formal meeting Monday morning." Grant straightened immediately. "You're seriously doing this here?" The woman auditor answered calmly. "You created the situation, sir." That shut him up. A hotel security manager appeared a minute later after somebody from corporate quietly requested assistance. Again, no scene. No dragging people out. Just soft, professional voices and controlled embarrassment. Grant looked at Emily one final time before leaving, but not with regret, with resentment. That seemed to break something inside her completely. He walked away flanked by two hotel staff members and one company executive, while conversations quietly resumed around the ballroom. The jazz piano player near the bar kept performing like nothing had happened. Funny thing is, life usually does continue like that. Most people don't stop for your heartbreak. Linda let out a long, shaky breath beside me. I thought this would feel better, she admitted. I understood exactly what she meant. Because standing there, I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted. Emily wiped at her face quickly. Danny, please. I looked toward the elevators. I can't do this in front of people. We rode downstairs in silence. Just the two of us. The elevator music somehow made everything feel even sadder. Outside, cold Indianapolis air hit us immediately. Valet attendants moved cars beneath glowing hotel lights while traffic rolled steadily down the street. Emily wrapped her arms around herself. I never wanted this, she whispered. I laughed once, not cruelly, just tired. Really? Tears kept coming down her face. It started during the IVF treatments. I stayed quiet. You pulled away, she said softly. Not intentionally, I know that now. But everything became schedules and hormones and disappointment and bills. I stared out toward the street. Grant listened. There it was. The oldest story on earth. He made me feel... She stopped herself. I don't know. You don't have to explain the mechanics to me, Emily. She flinched hearing her full name instead of M. That hurt her too. I still love you, she whispered. For a moment, all I could think about was our old first apartment over the hardware store downtown. Eating frozen pizza on lawn chairs because we couldn't afford furniture yet. Years together. Vacations. Funerals. Christmas mornings. Noah being born. A whole life. And somehow we still ended up here. Finally, I looked at her. Maybe she did love me in some broken, complicated way. But not enough to stop. Love without loyalty turns into something else eventually, I said quietly. Emily cried harder after that. But she didn't argue. Because deep down she knew it was true. We stood there another minute in the cold. Then I said the sentence both of us had been avoiding for weeks without realizing it. I think we need to separate. Emily closed her eyes and nodded. A year later, my house sounded different. Quieter. Not empty exactly. Just rearranged. Noah was 15 months old by then, and every other week the place exploded with toy trucks, mashed bananas, cartoons, and tiny socks somehow ending up in impossible places. Then he'd go back to Emily's for a few days, and suddenly all I could hear again was the refrigerator humming and the furnace kicking on at night. People don't talk enough about that part of divorce after 50. The silence. You spend decades adjusting yourself around another person's breathing routines, coffee habits, television preferences. Then one day you're reheating leftover chili alone at 9 p.m., while a dishwasher runs in the background like company. Some nights were harder than I expected. I'm not ashamed to admit that. Especially after Noah went to sleep. That was usually when things crept in. Questions. Memories. Anger that showed up late like bad weather. There were evenings I'd stand at the kitchen sink staring out into the backyard, thinking about how quickly a normal life can split into before and after. But there were good moments too. Real ones. Saturday mornings, Noah rode in the shopping cart at Lowe's wearing little sneakers that lit up when he walked. He'd point at ceiling fans like they were magic inventions. Dada. Every single aisle. Every fan. Didn't matter. Still made me laugh. My sister Karen said he had my stubbornness in Emily's eyes. That felt about right. The divorce itself stayed surprisingly civil. Not warm. Not friendly. But civil. No screaming courtroom battles. No ugly fights over furniture. We used mediators in Fort Wayne and worked through custody schedules like two exhausted adults trying not to make things worse for a child who didn't ask for any of it. Emily moved into a townhouse outside Fishers near Indianapolis after taking a remote job with a smaller medical supplier in Ohio. Last I heard, people at her old company still talked about the gala. Corporate scandals travel fast, especially in Midwest business circles where everybody quietly knows everybody. Grant lost almost everything within 6 months. His executive position disappeared first. Then came the investigation into expense fraud. After that, the professional reputation he spent 20 years building started collapsing piece by piece. I heard through Linda that several former employees came forward after the auditors started digging deeper. Apparently, Grant had a habit of using company money like a personal wallet. The affair became almost secondary. Funny how that works sometimes. Companies will tolerate immoral behavior a lot faster than stolen money. Linda eventually moved to Arizona to be near her sister. We still text occasionally. Mostly updates about life. Dog pictures. Weather complaints. Normal things. There's something strange about surviving betrayal with somebody. Even after the anger fades, there's this quiet understanding between you that never fully disappears. Around springtime, I started sleeping better. Not every night, but better. I got back into fishing again. Saturday mornings at Cedarville Reservoir with a thermos of coffee and old country music playing low through the truck speakers. The first few trips felt lonely. Then eventually they started feeling peaceful instead. That surprised me. Healing doesn't usually happen dramatically. Nobody wakes up suddenly transformed. It's smaller than that. One decent morning, then another. Then one day you realize you went almost 3 hours without thinking about what happened. And that feels enormous. Emily and I slowly found a rhythm co-parenting Noah. Awkward at first, painfully polite, like co-workers trapped in a weird project together. But over time, some of the bitterness softened around the edges. Not erased, just less sharp. One evening during a custody exchange, Noah ran toward me holding one of his stuffed animals backward by the tail. Emily laughed automatically watching him wobble across the driveway. And for half a second, we sounded like ourselves again. That hurt a little. But it also reminded me something important. Not every relationship ends because the love was fake. Sometimes people simply damage something beyond repair. There's a difference. Around August, Karen convinced me to start attending a church small group again. Mostly divorced people over 40 talking about life while drinking weak coffee in folding chairs. That's where I met Rachel. 48, school librarian, divorced 6 years. She wore reading glasses low on her nose and laughed with her whole face instead of trying to look elegant doing it. Nothing dramatic happened. No movie moment. We just started talking after meetings, then texting occasionally, then grabbing breakfast after church. That pace felt right to me. At our age, people stop needing fireworks all the time. Sometimes kindness feels more attractive than excitement. One afternoon, Rachel asked casually, "Do you still hate your ex-wife?" I thought about it honestly before answering. "No," I said finally. "I don't think hate's the right word anymore." "What is?" I looked out the diner window for a second. Sadness, maybe. Gratitude for certain years, disappointment. Depends on the day. Rachel nodded like she understood exactly. Because she probably did. The last time Emily and I talked seriously happened 2 weeks before Noah's first birthday. She came by to drop off his diaper bag and stayed awkwardly near the doorway, while Noah chased our old Labrador through the living room. Finally, she said quietly, "Thank you." I looked up from the kitchen counter. For what? For not trying to destroy me. That sat between us for a moment. The truth was, there had been opportunities. I could have made the divorce uglier, could have exposed more publicly, could have gone after her harder emotionally. Some people probably would have. But by the end, I realized something. Pain spreads. Humiliation spreads. Cruelty spreads too. And eventually somebody has to decide to stop passing it around. That didn't make Emily innocent. Didn't erase what happened. But Noah deserved at least one parent who wasn't consumed by bitterness. Maybe that's what finally mattered most to me. After Emily left that night, I sat on the living room floor building block towers with Noah while rain tapped softly against the windows. He knocked the tower over and laughed so hard he hiccuped. And sitting there in sweatpants at 53 years old, I realized something unexpected. My life hadn't ended. It had changed. Painfully. Messily. But not permanently ruined. Betrayal changes people. I believe that now. Some wounds stay tender longer than others. But I also think people still get to choose what kind of person they become afterward. If somebody broke your trust later in life, I hope you eventually found some peace too. And if you're still figuring that part out, you're probably not alone in that. Thanks for spending this time with me tonight.